This is the third of the graphic medicine confab series for the summer. I know a lot of these faces from the first two because we've been enjoying seeing you come back over and over again. There is one more too that's in 2 weeks. I just want to remind everyone that Benjamin Schwartz is going to do a presentation. Oh, now I'm going to forget the date. The 28th, that's the date, right? Right, Ben?
I believe that's right.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, I mean, let me just start my little introduction here. So I'm Kriota Willberg, as you guys know. I'm one of the 4 people in this graphic medicine confab: Kriota Willberg, Benjamin Schwartz, Joel, Christian Gill. They're all on, yeah, you can give a wave. So my topic today is actually going to be collaborating across access needs. And I want to make clear at the beginning here, I'm definitely not giving you a prescription for this. I'm definitely not, I'm not even sure that we did this the right or the best way, but I wanted to describe how me and my 2 collaborators from my most recent project, which was actually someone else's memoir, so very much a co-author in that regard. The book was called Dancing After 10, just came out with Fantagraphics in May. And the book is about Vivian Chong. She's my co-author. She had a really traumatic experience with a medical reaction called TEN, that's toxic epidermal necrolysis. And so in her 20s, she was a vibrant young being, upcoming artist, graphic designer, musician, doing all kinds of interesting things with her life. And then all of a sudden, this TEN reaction, TEN syndrome, just completely changed her life. And so she ended up with a long hospitalization, a lot of residual effects that continue to live with her, that she lives with. She's blind. She's got some hearing loss, though I think she mostly hears quite well. It just kind of comes and goes because she's got scar tissue in her eardrums that has actually been repaired, but there's still some residual difficulty there. And she's basically remade her life, still at quite a young age, but all on her own terms. And we made a book about that traumatic experience and about everything she's done since then. So I do have a little presentation on the book to share with you. I believe I have the capacity, yes I do, to share my screen. Wonderful. Let's see, bear with me. Okay, so, oh, maybe I can make this, I think we encountered this issue last time where I would love it to just be a full screen for you. Let me see if I can make that happen. How is that working? Do you guys see?
What you have to do is you have to go in and instead of selecting the screen, you have to select the application or vice versa. Whichever one you selected, you have to select the opposite because I had the same thing happen last week.
Oh, okay, let me just turn it off and turn it on again. And then wherever I end up, I'm just going to stay there because I don't want to spend so long doing this. Okay. Let's see, portion of screen. Ooh. Yeah. That could be cool. Okay. What do we got? I think you're still seeing the whole thing, but maybe that's okay. Okay. Can I just get like a thumbs up from either Bob or Kriota? Or, yeah, you can see my screen there? Okay, cool.
We see the book cover.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so this is the book that I was just talking about. This is Dancing After 10. These are drawings of Vivian. Vivian and I created this book together as co-authors, but I also need to mention the 3rd collaborator in this project. This was Kathleen Ray. So Kathleen Ray is an award-winning and incredible superhuman choreographer and dancer. She's actually a strong advocate for disability, especially in the arts community. And she's also basically pioneered and maintained the contact dance community in Toronto. So that's a dance form that's based on contact between 2 people who are improvising at the same time and responding to one another. And so actually Vivian met Kathleen through that contact dance program because it's a way that made dance accessible to Vivian, just being able to feel a person, move with a person, feel the music, but not need to visually orient to where everyone is in space. Kathleen and Vivian actually decided to make a dance show together that is another version of Vivian's one-woman show all about her life, especially her experience with 10 and after. And so in the process of making that dance show, that collaboration of theirs, Vivian actually showed Kathleen a number of her own drawings. And she had been making a comic that was about this hospitalization, about this traumatic experience when she was losing her sight. She was just nose to the page, drawing as much as she could right at the very end of her vision. So she had put together what was going to be the beginning of this book. This is her original cover for the book that she created while she had about 20% of her vision. We all have different access needs. And I want to recognize some of the challenges that we were in for here, because Vivian, being a person who is blind and who has a little bit of trouble hearing, has lots of more obvious access needs for us to try and accommodate, and things that we needed to hear from her about exactly how she likes to do things, because even with common technologies, everyone's got their own way, right? So I wanted to highlight here just some of the gifts and challenges that we were working with right off the bat. Obviously, Vivian's access needs are a bit more apparent. Mine less so, because I have this voice condition, this chronic pain condition, that really comes and goes, and it depends on a lot of things like my stress levels, how well I'm taking care. Also, some things I don't totally understand. So I have this intermittent ability to use my voice. Vivian can't see in the traditional external way. And then Kathleen additionally has, she's on the autism spectrum and has a learning disability regarding reading and writing. Mostly I find her to be very easy to communicate with, but there are definitely moments where we're sort of encountering all of those things at once. And it's very interesting trying to make those three needs fit together. So that's one of our big things in challenging us and also kind of giving us a good opportunity. Communication became so important, and I think is probably the most important thing when you're communicating, or sorry, when you're collaborating across various needs. And it doesn't even need to be in relation to disability. It's just that everyone is an individual. Communication is extremely difficult sometimes. It takes a lot of investment. In this case, it was really important for us to communicate what this book was going to be, especially because the person who the book was about couldn't actually verify independently that we had created something she wanted to see that was going to represent her life. She had no way to actually just look and see, oh yeah, that's what I want. It all needed to be mediated. We also had some cultural differences because Vivian is from Hong Kong originally, so I know that our sort of assumptions about how things would work actually ended up being quite different, and we only encountered those things as they emerged. We had no way to predict them. So that was an interesting challenge. And then the gifts that we had to gain from this experience were basically just all around that uniqueness, the uniqueness of these access needs, these abilities, these perspectives blending. I'm not going to dwell too much on that because we could just go on about it forever. But so Vivian's art, she created when she was losing her sight. These are some of her original drawings, and this is what I was given to make the book. You know, they can be very clean and clear. They can also be very chaotic. They can be very dense. They're really communicating just the most essential information, and a lot of that is emotional information. So that's what I had to work with. And me being a person who can see them now, I was trying to make something from this aesthetic, but also bring what I had to the table in a clean way, a way that, you know, made it clear that there were two voices at play, that there were two artists, but also that really her experience was at the center of the whole thing. The process that we used to make this happen, this was really, I had to just make it up. There's no template for such a thing, and I'm definitely not proposing that this be anyone's template, but it's a starting point. We didn't have any starting points. We didn't have any guideposts or ideas about how to do this other than just, you know, our own kind of compass for what we might want in this experience. So we started with Vivian and I talking a lot I had phone calls with her. She would tell me stories she wanted me to include. I got her to record voice memos on her phone because she has assistive technology with her smartphone. So she can speak to it and it will just either select the command to record something if she wants to, or also she can do speech to text and get a document from just speaking. One challenge there, which is very interesting, is that Vivian does have an accent, so sometimes the accent caused misinterpretation on the speech to text technology. So we did a lot of that. We did a lot of, she recorded a bunch of documents, or recorded a bunch of recordings for me. I just took all of the stories that she gave and tried to stitch them into something that actually had a sequence, something that was readable for all the important moments, all of the highlights, all of the lows, everything that you really needed to follow her on this emotional journey, because we're really trying to capture like 15 years of her life, and a very intense 15 years. So it was a lot. But once I had sort of put it together in a way that I thought made sense, those were like descriptions, page 1, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, all the way through. This is what's happening in this panel. These are the words. This is a thought bubble. This is a speech bubble. Super detailed. I've never planned a comic so thoroughly in my entire life. And then I had to send it to her as a document so that her speech to text, I actually wrote them wrong in this little comic that I made. Or sorry, no, this is text to speech. Oh, I get these things mixed up so much. So text to speech would mean the computer reads it to her, so she could listen. And then she could tell me what she wanted me to change. So, I mean, I just made this like really quick snapshot of like, I have so many notes from all of these experiences, because we didn't know until we had everything what was going to be included, and then we would cut things out and move things around, and there were just like so many recordings and so many versions of the image descriptions for each thing. I had to keep them dated and then add when they were edited, and documents of my questions to ask her, character descriptions, trying to understand like who are the people in this story, because they're not presently in the story, they're in the past and they're in Vivian's memory. So working with that was really interesting, and it just required more preparation than I've ever done for anything, because it all needed to come through Vivian and then through me, and I had to understand it as a person who wasn't there, and also can't just show her my work to say, hey, does this drawing look the way that this person is in your memory? So we had a lot of describing. And this is just a little close-up example of like a single page description being just everything that happens. And I'll actually show you that next to the page that it turned into in the end in just a moment. So yeah, next would be, she'd give me a call. She'd say, okay, let's talk about this document. And Vivian can't talk on the phone with me and also be looking at something to refer to it. So this is really an act of like incredible memorization, but also just emotional memory, I think, on her part. I can't really speak to that because that was her experience, but what I recall was I'd be able to say, okay, well, this section starts like this. And then she'd say, oh yeah, here's what I wanted you to change there. And so I didn't have to actually read through every single page and panel back to her when we were talking, but she would have enough of a memory of like what had changed in the story, what had happened, what the sort of arcs were, that she could remember all of the little things that she wanted changing, from things like, I wouldn't say it that way, I need these words to replace those, to things that actually shaped, well, you know, before this happened, this actually happened, and I think I'd like this to come up because I want them to see this part of me before they meet that part of the story. So lots and lots of collaboration in there, and that's why I have this little repeat cycle at the end, showing that we would just do this over and over again until she was happy with the descriptions of what I would eventually draw. So then I drew it, and obviously I'm using her art as well and merging the two styles, but a lot of the book was fresh because she had about 100 drawings at the time that she was, she had completely lost her sight and was unable to continue. So that was a really limited portion of the story that basically occupies her before hospital time, just the few days before the hospital, and then the actual hospital time. And then I was picking up everything after that point, and also all of the backstory from before. So a ton of information. Promise this isn't going to be that much longer because I think 10 minutes is a very has passed, and I find it very challenging to stick to a short answer to any given question. So basically I drew everything and then typed image descriptions for the things I drew. So this is a one page that there's how it was described on the left, and then there's what it turned into on the right. And it had to be like quite precisely what was described to make sure that she would feel I had represented what I was going to do to her ahead of time, and that I had fulfilled what I promised I would do. And same here, this is that page that you saw in a bit more detail where it's, you know, panel 1, Vivian and Seth on the airplane, and then you see them, Vivian and Seth on the airplane. It's just, yeah, it has to be very exact to be, in my opinion, to be ethical and respectful to Vivian. So I would send the finished drawings and the image descriptions to Kathleen, who functioned as the project manager, access facilitator. She did all of the financials. She was just like the glue for this whole project. And she was Vivian's eyes for the section where there were images to see. And so she could actually give an impression as well as just the description. She could say, oh, it really feels this way. Or, oh, when I see this, I just think of this. Or it seems really, this image is really dark, or this image is really joyful, or she could give all that information as a reader. And then I got notes to change things, and then I went back and changed them, and then I described the changes, and then I did the same cycle again of Vivian and Kathleen reviewing what I had done, talking about it with each other, bringing it back to me with their notes. It was a long process, but actually we did it in 5 months for a 160-page book. So it was the hardest I've ever worked, and it's actually something that I'm really recovering from even now in revising my relationship to work, because I just kind of grinded for that whole time, and it harmed my well-being. So I'm remaking all of that now, which frankly I think is another access need that we don't always pay attention to, is just like, what can we reasonably accomplish while still feeling like a whole human being? And collaboration can really challenge that too, because everyone has different versions of feeling whole, and also different relationships to work. So I just want to show you a little bit about how I merged some of these styles, because I really wanted to like honor what Vivian had and then add what I could to make it just a bigger impact. So what I got was the thing on the left, and then I made additions that sort of blew it up, the image on the right. As you can see, some of the images are much more in the abstract. They're really just like conveying a feeling, they're conveying not exactly metaphor, but a lot of like strong and symbolic imagery is present there. And then we actually had a fourth collaborator who was the publisher. And the publisher thought that color would really help us communicate better in the story, keep the flow going, add emotion. And I think that's sort of, it's one of its wonderful functions is color. We have so many feelings about color. So we added this color blue, or the publishers added this color blue, and that was just another layer of collaborating and another chance for us to kind of teach them what was needed in this particular collaboration with all of these people who had different access needs. So where like an email would work fine for me, a phone call would work better for Vivian and Kathleen. All of us needing to communicate all at once meant that there were going to be some emails and there were going to be some miscommunications, and there was lots going back and forth all the time. So that's another element of this that I think, if you're going to collaborate across access needs, having the time to go through those things, to go in the direction you think you might need, and then actually reverse, change course as things change, as people's needs reveal themselves, as difficulties arise and then need to be resolved. There needs to be time for it. So the time pressure we were under was definitely a challenge, but it was worth it to take the time in each of those instances to figure out what was best. And then this slide I've titled Drawing with Inner Vision, because part of this book was actually getting Vivian to draw now, draw without her sight, because that felt like a way to give us access into her world as it is, and also pay a little homage to her drawing feeling, her drawing skill from the past, like something that she hasn't lost, but she's got a new relationship to. And so there are some drawings in the book that are from her during this process, when I said, hey, could you make some things that express feelings that are related to this section so we could add that? Or could you give me actually some phrases? And it turned into, at the very end of the book, her including poems. So we really wanted to make that accessible to her. And then sometimes, like in this case, she would make a drawing and then I would add to that drawing and try to just expand it so that there was some bridging between our two styles. And this is an image of Vivian drawing outside with her guide dog Catcher, just to leave you with a nice warm image. And this is the three of us, the three collaborators on this project. So I'm sure there are questions, and I'm sure I just blasted over the time limit. Hi! Yep, that's what I do. But yeah, I would love to hear from you guys, and I'm happy to answer more questions, more detail, or different directions I didn't didn't approach. I really love seeing all these little hands. Everyone's clapping for me. So sweet.
We've got lots of questions in the chat that were coming up as you were talking. So let's see. David said, based on the, if you can just say it, you can just say your question if you want to. I'm just trying to make sure you get to all of them. So.
All right, be careful. I'm unmuting myself. Stand back. I think I actually threw out two questions, but I'll just go with the first one. I don't want to hog time here. I was particularly curious, based on your work with Dumb, Georgia, I'm fascinated to hear, you gave us a little snapshot of this at the end, which was very helpful. How did you choose to depict Vivian's own senses? Like, how is limited visibility visualized, or limited hearing made manifest?
Yeah, good question. Well, as far as Vivian's senses, I think that, to me, that's very intimate. It's intimate for the person who's experiencing those senses. And so for me, making Dumb, it was a very strong focus, because it's something that we don't share. We don't get to sort of vicariously live someone else's senses, but the translation to it on the page can approximate something that we can all access in some way. At least those of us who can see that page. And going into this as someone who generally does not like to speak for others, being asked to speak for someone else or asked to draw for someone else, I know I'm failing. Like, I know that I'm not going to be able to communicate her the way that she would communicate herself. That's just not going to happen. And it was important to me in this book to represent myself as an observer, and for the book to actually be observing her. That the things that are inside of her, she's mostly sharing from her previous drawings, and then from some of the drawings that she made now that are very much sensory oriented, and they're like images to represent as opposed to depictions of things as they might be observed. But when I had the opportunity, I did draw things like an inability to hear clearly, because there's a portion of the book where Vivian does start to experience the hearing loss. And for that, actually, I would love to be able to pull up an image for you right now. I don't think that I have one that's just sitting there ready to see. But maybe if I poke around here while we're talking, I can actually find it. Actually, no, because my hard drive is somewhere else. Okay, so you'll have to check out the book. But I mean, for the hearing loss, I was able to use something visual, because it was, I used sort of like a hazy fog that appeared around her head, and then also took away things like the sounds that were present in other parts of the book, like things that we had actually seen before we would see again, but we would see it without the sound, or the sound would be weird or quiet. Things like the visualizing what she could see or couldn't see, I didn't concern myself with so much, because it was more like there are very small moments in the book where there's a lot of shadow, because she does experience mostly a darkness. And then sometimes she can see very like a really strong shadow or really strong contrast she can still see, but her vision is very, very low. Like, I couldn't even tell you the percentage, to be honest. But there's enough vision there that like she can tell when there's a large shadow in front of her. She can tell if you're wearing a really strong color. She can sort of see like the color, like a blue shirt that Kathleen wore one day, and Vivian was like, "Whoa, blue!" But you know, that was all she could see. So I didn't represent that a ton, because like I said, I was drawing the book as a person observing her, and I did not want to erase that. Next question.
So you've got a couple of them in the chat. You've got so Charles. No, that's not a question. Can you say more about how it harmed you, Georgia, that graphic medicine topic unto itself?
Yeah, for sure. Well, then this is a lovely segue into where my work is at right now and what I'm headed into, which is really changing my relationship to working, to how my work influences my well-being, like which of those is a priority. I would say that they had been on sort of opposite ends of a teeter-totter of like, I can feel well or I can be working. And that's been a real part of my life, partly because when I was making Dumb, I actually experienced another huge chronic pain expression in my hands. So I had to actually completely stop working on Dumb because the pain was so present that I couldn't make it anymore. And that put them on real opposite ends of the spectrum of I can either be working or I can feel fine. So that's something I've been trying to heal for a number of years now. I do have mostly the use of my hands, and it's just like my voice. I just manage them differently, and my well-being has to be a very forefront part of my life at all times. But I still carry a lot of beliefs and pressures that I've adopted from the outside world and that I believe about my productivity being a very important thing in my life. Also, I'm trying to make money, trying to live, so there's a pressure on that. There's always this kind of, oh, suck it up and move on, like suck it up and keep making things approach that I don't know where I got it from. It's probably just in the air, but it's also very challenging to, especially in this culture under capitalism, colonialism, all of these very like achievement-oriented and dominating perspectives, to not like adopt it inside yourself and then become someone who's dominating. Like, I'm dominating my work, I'm dominating my life, I'm the person in control of all of these things, I take care of myself. This version of life that is very much like pressure is on my shoulders and I'm the one who has to deliver. So if my shoulders are broken, it's just like, well, whatever, no one else is going to do this for me, so I have to just keep going. And so I'm trying to undo that, because what I found is that when I actually dive into my health as the first priority, when I wake up in the morning and I'm really there for me, and I maybe even take time to do a practice, like sometimes I meditate, I do a practice called continuum movement. These are very much like of the moment practices. Within that space, beautiful creative ideas emerge, and solutions, creative solutions to problems I've encountered just arrive, and it's wonderful. And then I'm very excited to convey them, and making my work from that place feels quite like regenerative, and it feels restorative and good. But that dominance stance that I've taken of just, oh, I have to take care of this, I have to be the person who produces a lot and like, you know, shows up as an artist, I'm a professional, all of this, that kind of perspective really suppresses my creativity. And I think I was really doing that to meet the deadline of this book, because I cared a lot about the people who brought it to me, about Kathleen and Vivian, having it for the dance show that they were putting on this spring, which tragically was canceled. You know, appropriately was canceled, but it was also a tragedy for all of the work that they had put in. So I was really racing to meet that deadline, and then we were also learning as we went on this process, and there was a lot of struggle for me in figuring out how to feel okay while that was going on. And ultimately, I put my well-being second. I was like, nope, I just got to finish this. And yeah, like a year later, or, you know, 6 months later, I'm still like figuring out, okay, I actually have to be much more conscious about that.
I feel like we have this, like, just in general, like there's this idea that you have to suffer for your art. And I think, you know, this goes back a little bit to what I said last week about that's just not the way it works, right? You're going to make good stuff if you're in a good place, because you're going to feel like you need to do things, and you're going to feel like it. And so, you know, just with myself and with my students, you know, students are like, I pulled an all-nighter. I'm like, I'm not impressed. You just didn't manage your time right. Right. Yeah. So like, I want you to watch Golden Girls over the weekend. I don't want you to be spending all your time doing, you know what I mean? Like, just
beautiful advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, just this idea that we have to work ourselves into these places. And I mean, I think it's just really appropriate to just think about it in terms of just like for everybody, like, you know, like I put out a book every year, but I also have binge watched a lot of TV shows and watched a lot of random stuff. Like, you have to know that balance between things, and don't let the idea and And it wasn't Golden Girls that I binge watched. I just use that 'cause it's funny when I say Golden Girls, everybody laughs, right? Low key Blanche. Yeah, like just you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself, because if you take care of yourself, then you can make more work and you can make better work. And so like that's all like part of the process of balance and all of this. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. This is
It's great stuff though. It's really there. And I'm so happy you're out there as a teacher helping your students understand that, because it's true. There's a real, like, I don't know, there's like a myth around it, or there's a romance around it that you would just work so hard.
It's romance. It's a romance, and this idea that you have to kill yourself in order to do these things. And like, if you are capable and you want to, and it drives you, like I know people that it just drives them. That's all they want to do is that. But I also know other people that it's just like, you know what? I need to like do something different. Like you need to do, like I was at one point collecting carnivorous plants just so I could have something that wasn't art related to actually get involved in. And I think that's a really important thing, because, it can be oppressive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I feel it's very important to recognize its place in our culture, that when you actually put yourself first, you're doing something that's actually counter our mainstream culture. It's very, like, it's hard, not just because it's hard, but also because it's subverting all of the programming that we're all getting all the time about how to achieve, how to succeed, how to be independent, how to not need other people, how to be good artists. It's like, it's all in there. Anyway, so it's really hard work, and I'm focusing a lot of my attention and my next book on that. So I'm hoping that I can even offer a richer version of that journey through all of that. And now I'm trying to catch up on all these comments and questions and things, and I wonder
I started talking and I stopped looking at things.
Oh, that's okay, Alex.
So,
okay, there are some lovely comments here.
I'll keep skipping over the comments and go direct to the question. So the question of what comic, there was one about what editor did you work with at Fantagraphics?
Yeah, I mean, there's a wonderful team of people over there. Editor-wise, I mean, I think technically the editor was Gary Groff, but on this book, he was definitely my editor on Dumb, but he was like on the team of people who we were working with for this one. So we had Gary, we had Conrad Groff, we had the designer Chelsea Wirtz, we had, oh my God, I think I'm forgetting somebody, but that feels bad. Well, maybe that was actually it for the sort of editorial team, but they're all really wonderful and like really took to trying to learn like what was needed in this case, because it's a very different way of communicating for them.
So Kevin says, curious about some of the process included with the book. I'm curious, was some of the process included with the book?
Yes, so this comic I actually just made for the purposes of sharing and presentations, but the book does include at the back, there's sort of like a piece of writing that Vivian created with Kathleen to describe what the process was like. It's definitely a little less detailed in the sense of it, this level of detail is only for nerds like me. But there is like a page for that at the back so you can read a little bit about it, yeah.
Most of the other ones, I think, are not questions, they're more just comments. Thank yous.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody else has any questions, you can just like yell them, because I have to put my glasses on and I always look like an old man when I put my glasses on.
I'll ask a question.
Sure, yeah.
I couldn't find the raise hand icon for some reason on the thing. So anyway.
It's at the bottom of the reactions. When you go down to the screen, the bottom of the screen, when you scroll over it, there's like a little thing.
No, I just see thumbs up and clapping. Anyway, but I'm here, so it doesn't matter. So, speaking of well-being, speaking of how we plan these things out, like, is this the type of thing that you would actually, like this type of collaboration, is this the kind of thing that you would be interested in doing again? Or, I mean, obviously you would be doing it differently, but
yeah.
Is it something that you're interested in pursuing in the future, or, how are you feeling about it? Like that? work?
Well, I would say it's considerably more work than working alone. That's one thing to consider. If you're wanting to do a project like this, it's much more work. I think the worst moments of the project are when I was resisting that it was more work, because then it would be a breakdown in communication. If there was something that I was like, oh, we'll work that out later, or someone would write me and I'd be like, well, they didn't really answer my questions, but I don't know, I'll just keep going. Like, those were moments where we had the most difficulty, I think. So you have to just like really accept that there's going to be a lot more process to this, a lot less time drawing, a lot more time talking about drawing and talking about what's going to happen. And it's definitely something that I would do again. I'm actually in a collaboration right now, but it's not a collaboration that has really drastic access needs like there was in this case. So I'm definitely open to collaborating, but I think it's something that for my energy levels and output, like I got to return after this collaboration back to myself and focus on the work that I really want to make with no one else bringing input to that. And then, you know, once I've had my time and I've expressed myself and I've found that place for my voice again, then I would be happy to bring my talent back out to someone else's story. And like, it was really lovely being able to focus on someone else's ideas and feelings, because actually I found it to have a lot less pressure than when I'm working on my own, because there's someone just saying, I want you to do this. And also you can say, so how did that feel? And they can answer it. Instead of when I think, well, how do I feel about this? And there's like a whole mess of stuff that I have to work through to figure it out. And something I want to do, I might change my mind tomorrow, and it's up to me. So of course I'm going to do it 10 times. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it was a lot of work, and if I ever were to do it again, I would take probably 4 times the length of time, because 5 months was just, it was totally backbreaking. So yeah, if I wanted to do this again, it would mean I would have a healthy timeline. I would have hopefully a little healthy budget and a healthy self-care practice, keeping it all balanced.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I just always find it really interesting, like how we try to balance the work that keeps us working with the work we want, like we really want to do, like our deep inner projects weighed against like the other projects that come our way. So.
Oh yeah, and a part of taking this project on was that I just felt very, very curious about how it would go. Very curious about what it would take, because like I said, I had no template for working on it, and I was like, well, having been sort of steeped in the disability world and welcomed by the disability comics world, interested in graphic medicine, totally obsessed in my own life with trauma and trying to figure out like what people need and how we can sort of change as a culture to accept the fact that we all actually have quite different sensitivities and needs around just interacting, emotional communication. I felt really curious about it and felt like I was at least on my way to prepared to do it. And then I think the timeline really crunched it for me. And you know, whenever we're stressed, we sort of revert. Like we can't be in our most present selves because that takes a lot of energy. Sort of lean on habits, like go back into old ways of thinking or reactivity or all kinds of things that I would have loved to not have be a part of this process. But because I was like really putting this pressure on myself, it was a hard thing to like hold. Yeah, and now I'm excited. And now I feel just like, oh yeah, get me back to my own work. Like I'm so excited. I could just do this the way I want, and do like say the things I want to say. So it's actually nice having like a swing between those things where you're like, oh, take the pressure off me. I'll just do whatever you want. And then when you're done with that, you're like, oh, thank God, now it's my turn. Feels really good.
There's a lot of questions.
We should get to
Yeah. Could you share more of your detail? This is from Corey. Could you share more of your detail on your process for logging or indexing the Vivian audio recordings such that you could refer back to them in an orderly way?
Yeah, I mean, she gave them titles. I think that actually might have been somewhat automatic. I'm not entirely sure because I don't know the technology she was using for like voice commanding the process. But all of the files that she sent me had a title that was inclusive of like what it was about. It was a descriptive title. For myself, the way that I like this is outside of comics, but something that I find super useful is having a naming hierarchy. So like the way that I name files on my computer is like very it's very consistent. so that if I want to search for something, like I already know every file name has like the year and my name and the project that it is, and then the description of the specific file. And yeah, I'm a big fan of like folders and organization just generally anyway. So this, even what I showed you, that was actually like a little less organized than I would like it to be, because sometimes I would just really quickly name something like notes and then put the date. And the date is always like month and then day. So it would help me like sort them numerically in the filing organization, just the way that it appears in the window, and then also like, yeah, give me an idea of what was going on in that document. But I think it's a pretty personal thing, but I definitely recommend having like a structure for how you name things. And then you just plug in whatever you're working on, you just plug it into the structure.
Do you have any advice for people who work with cartoonists, ways to encourage self-care among these artists? And before you answer that, I would just add one thing. If you're a writer, actually draw stick figures. That will help.
Oh, yeah.
Helps you understand a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes, I think the best way that we can encourage self-care among the people that we are working with, living with, interacting with, is to demonstrate it. If you do it, people will notice you doing it. If you do it, if you are feeling better and you're behaving in like a calm way that they appreciate, or a very like authentic way that they appreciate, it's going to rub off. They're going to notice. And then of course, if you're exploring things that work for you and they have some sort of need, or they're struggling with something, you've got something to offer. You say like, this really works for me. I do this. Yeah, I mean, that is really significant. And I think that beyond that, just being supportive is super key. Like, you know, there's no wrong way for someone to support themselves. There's just, hey, is it working for you or is it not? Like, and I want to support you to do what's working for you. And I want to make sure that you find that. And that might take trial and error. And I just support that. Like, I'm just happy for you to keep looking for that thing that makes you feel good or makes you feel like you.
So there's a lot. Tell me when you want me to stop asking questions, or maybe Kriota or Ben can tell me when we can stop asking questions. Are there any works that inspired you, even though there were no templates? Were there any works that inspired you? That's just from David.
Yeah, with regards to communicating like different sensory experiences. Someone mentioned it in one of the comments earlier, but Joseph Lambert's, oh my God, now I'm forgetting the title of it, but that really
Helen Keller.
Thank you, yes. Joseph Lambert's Helen Keller is like probably the most overt version of that I've seen, where there's just a real, like he really created a language of the sensations that she was experiencing and built it up for the course of the book, and built it into something that was more detailed, even though we were also getting these visions of outside of Helen Keller, the experience she was having, as you would see it if you were just standing there watching. There was also just like such an inner world there. And I think that pretty much any book that I've ever read that includes like a really visual depiction of an emotional state, and especially if there's a sequence of that emotional state being depicted as they move through the world, like as a character is moving through the world, or as just like something progresses over time. If I try to pull these names out of my head right now, we're just going to be sitting here while I'm like staring off into the distance, but I like every time I see a book that includes an emotional state being made visual and made external from the body that it's happening in, or even if it's internal and it's kind of like a cool X-ray situation, all those things really impact me. They really, like, that really grabs me, because that's the stuff we would not know if it was not being put on the page. Like like a facial expression can convey a lot, but when someone really gets creative with like how they're expressing movement and feeling and intensity, all these things that are just impossible to know without actually being described, that stuff just totally fascinates me, and it all impacts me. It's all in there somewhere.
It's kind of like that. I don't know if you've seen Chris Ware's Lent book, in the part where he's dealing, where the one of the characters in it is dealing with like child abuse, and he does this whole thing where he's writing, but he also tries to like show what it felt like as a kid during that moment. It's in the Lent Acme Novelty Library, the one that's out. I forget the guy's first name, but it's Lent. It's really interesting, that whole breakup, because he doesn't do it in a very linear way. It's kind of really, it's exactly what you're talking about.
Jonathan?
Jonathan Lent, yes.
Nice.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I would love to see that. Actually, and Joel, in your book, The Little Flame, what we discussed last week, that fire, that's another one. That's a really clear symbol of like an emotion being present or something happening that we wouldn't know about just looking at the kid.
Yeah, and you have to set those things up like early on, you know, like what you were talking about, setting this up. It's kind of like, I was talking with Hillary Chute about this, and she said that, you know, like the first part of a comic sort of teaches you how to read something, and then you like, after that, you learned, like you got the system, right? Like you sort of, like it's a little confusing in the beginning. Or it's like, even like if you just think of surrealist poetry or like, you know, surrealist fiction, like it's the same thing. Sets up a way in which you have to start out, and then you give that person that information. And so like, that's just part of the process.
Right, and I actually want to just pop in on top of that and say that's one thing also about graphic medicine, is that the field is still so wide open that, you know, Georgia, you're making a book and there is no template for you to be able to do that. And like right now, I'm struggling with that same thing. I have no template for a book that I'm working on now, but it's like, there are so many opportunities for us to like dig deep and create our own languages that we can then like share with an audience, set it up, and then use it throughout the book to convey emotional, you know, information, emotional states, whatever. It's like, it's, you know, I think it's either daunting or inspiring. Right now it's daunting. Tomorrow it'll be inspiring.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Schrodinger's cat of inspiration.
Yeah. That's great. I just want to acknowledge that it's 10 to 8 now. So, I mean, officially we were done 5 minutes ago, but I'm very happy to hang out until 8 o'clock or maybe a little after 8 if we want to just keep these questions rolling.
So you guys just like, I think I've caught up to most of the questions. So if you guys want to say something, you can just say it as opposed to making me squint really.
Yeah, let's hear your voices a little bit.
I just wanted to jump in and say this is really incredible thinking about the semester ahead. As a teacher, as a leader of an art school, and the kind of sense of communication and the like struggles to go across different platforms. And I feel like I learned a lot listening to the way that you had to kind of slow down and speed up other things and just come up with new ways to communicate. It felt like such a model. We'll have some students in the classroom, some students learning asynchronously, and some students learning synchronously remotely. And I feel like I need models like this to think about what is a new form of communication about studio art in that mode, and how could you do that? Like, how could you set up collaborations with students? They're actually learning like collaborative communication in addition to maybe just doing their own projects. I guess got excited about what the way you described the process.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I think it's like the thing that I kept when you were talking, Georgia, the thing that I kept hearing and the way in which you were doing it, it was kind of like having multiple editors. And I think the best editors are really collaborative. They don't come in and just say, you need to do this, you need to do this. You need to like sit down and go, okay, here's the problem. How do we get there? And we sort of bounce ideas off of each other. And I think that if you're looking for the same kind of model for teaching, it's the same thing. It's not going in and being prescriptive and saying, do this, do this, do this. It's about, okay, here's the problem. Let's work together to find a solution, because that's actually a much better way of learning anyway. It takes it that sage on the stage idea away from it and becomes the guide on the side, and you're that person who's having that conversation. And I think that what you were doing, Georgia, in that situation was that sort of a thing. Like, we have a problem, we have to figure out ways in which to solve that, and we're going to play around with as many different modes of creativity as we can and communication until we get that. And I think that's what a good editor will do.
Yeah, very much so.
Coming from the world of art therapy, I think that your model that you came up with, that you guys co-created together, is actually a really inspiring model for how art therapy can move into a new, more collaborative, more, you know, client-led way of being in the future as well. I'm really, really excited about it, and so so touched by what you shared with us tonight. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Erin. That's wonderful.
Georgia, was the communication, the methods that you developed with her, do you feel that it was, it's limited to this project, or do you feel like you have a system of communication that can continue? Was something built here just for the project, or is it, do you now have a greater ease of communicating with her outside the project?
Interesting. No, I would say that that's still, what I learned is that it's really hard. And there are some things that I've been able to tweak. So just for an example, like if I want to write Vivian an email, what I've realized is that commas and apostrophes cause difficulty for the text to speech. Or at least I have to be aware that a long sentence, she's got to hold the whole thing in her head, and the screen reader is not giving her like the same sort of prosody, like the change in tone and pitch that we use when we're speaking. So short sentences are better. Short sentences that don't include commas are better. Even though when I read them, I think, wow, I sound like a robot. It's like, yeah, a robot's going to read it. That's the point. It just has to be really clear. And then, yeah, what I've learned is definitely best is for her, it's speaking on the phone, because we're having a moment of connection, and we can also just say, oh, wait, I didn't understand that. Can you repeat it? It's like lightning fast. But that's not always accessible to me. If my voice is hurting, I need to make time to heal it, like rest it, and then I can come back and have that conversation. And sometimes emails need to take the place of that communication. So it's mostly what I've learned is that it just does take a lot of attention in a way that we kind of assume communicating with people in our lives doesn't. I also think that that's not always true, especially in our close relationships. We actually need to be giving that amount of attention all the time to be really, really clear and on the same page. It's exhausting.
Great aunts and great uncles that test that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I do think that we learn our own idiosyncrasies over time, learn like, oh, I use this word pretty broadly to mean lots of things, but it has a pretty specific meaning to this person in my life. And so when I use it, I have to be more cautious about the context and what I'm saying. I think that's just revealing itself to be true all over the map. But particularly in a case where you're getting to know someone, like you're not yet at the point where you know what assumptions each of you is bringing to the table. And you're not yet at a point where you understand the context, or you understand their rhythm of communicating, of understanding. Like, I mean, I had a partner who, like, if I start a sentence and there's any confusion in the beginning of my sentence, he will like cut me off to ask a question about the thing that I was literally just about to say, because I start my communications as like narratives that I'm like weaving around. Like I'll say, oh, well, so this thing happened the other day, and it's important to know this because later I'm going to mention it again, and then I'm going to come back around, and here's the answer, here's the thing I'm trying to tell you. Some days I'm more articulate than others, and some days I feel like I'm just like so eloquently spinning this narrative. And yes, foreshadowing. And sometimes, like, I know when I'm talking to him, like especially if I'm tired and I'm not being that articulate, I am just being confusing. I'm just not saying what I'm trying to say clearly enough. So I've had to learn a lot of like very direct communication, and also, yeah, like to sort of name the miscommunication as it goes, to be like, that was unintentional. I think I meant this, but you heard that. Now can we go from here? And that, yeah, it's extra true when you're working with someone with whom you can't like make a gesture to communicate or to support something you're saying. You can't like look at them and say something and then use your hands or your body to like emphasize. You can't do that because like she can't see it. So there's a lot of like necessary control in like concision and clarity through speech spontaneously. It's a lot. It's a lot. I think everyone has different styles too. So there's got to be some room for your style, but communication takes a lot of attention. Well, maybe that's all of our questions for this evening. I just don't see anyone else with hands up. But, oh, Kriota's mentioning she's going to find a way to...
Yeah, I'm going to pop in really quickly. So we're recording all of these meetings. Eventually, I'll post them online. We also have the chats recorded. Things will be probably accessible through the graphic medicine website where you can click on a link and go to something. But because this project is a whim, and right now I'm on vacation, and when I get back from vacation, I have to go to work, right? It's going to take a while for everything to get up, but I swear it's going to get up eventually. And once it does, I have everyone's emails, so I will be emailing you all to let you know that all 4 of the meetings will eventually be up so that you can access the materials.
I noticed that your background, you and Bob's background changed, and I was like, are they in the same place?
Yes. So
Yes.
this is the beach art in the house that's next to the beach. So it's proving that I'm at the beach because you can see the picture right there. But anyway, yeah. So that's why you have a different background. Okay, I'm out.
Everyone. Yeah, I was just reading all the nice comments that are coming through. I really appreciate everybody being here and posing questions, and I'm definitely going to take time to read through all of the comments that I couldn't speed read and talk at the same time.
And also, Ben is, I'm pointing this way because that's where you are on my screen, Ben. But Ben will be facilitating the 4th confab. So, Joel, he's down. Is that?
Yeah, he's down.
Yeah, he's over there to me.
Okay, everybody point at Ben. There's Ben on your screen. That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah, excellent.
Great.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Indeed.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll say bye for now.
Yes,
Bye,
and
everybody.
we'll see you in 2 weeks, I hope.
See you in 2 weeks.
28.